All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to unpack something really interesting, a subtle but potentially massive change happening in South Asia. We're talking about Bangladesh and a quiet shift in its foreign policy that could have some serious ripple effects. Not just for the region, but for how smaller nations everywhere are trying to survive this new era of big power competition.
And here's what makes this so fascinating. There haven't been any big official announcements. No press conferences, no grand speeches. It's all happening just beneath the surface. This quote really captures the vibe perfectly. It feels like something is moving. And the big question we're tackling in this explainer is, what is really going on?
So, to really get what's changing, we first have to understand the foundation. For decades, Bangladesh has lived by this one very clear idea: friendship to all, malice toward none. But listen, this was never just a feel-good slogan. It was a core strategy, a playbook for survival and for growth.
And this lays out that strategy perfectly. Just think of it like a high-wire balancing act. On one side, you've got the US and Europe. They're the ones buying all the clothes Bangladesh makes. Then over here, you have China, the go-to partner for building huge things like bridges and power plants. And of course, you can't forget India, the giant next door, who's absolutely essential for keeping the region stable. For a long, long time, Bangladesh did a masterful job keeping everybody happy.
But that delicate balancing act, it's becoming almost impossible to pull off. The world that allowed for that kind of comfortable middle ground is just fading away. This intense rivalry between the US and China is forcing countries everywhere, especially in strategic spots like Bangladesh, to walk a much, much tougher line. That space to just stay neutral is shrinking, and it is shrinking fast.
So you're probably asking, okay, if there are no official announcements, how can we be so sure something is changing? Well, the answer is you have to follow the signals. You have to piece together all these subtle clues that, when you put them all together, start to tell a whole new story.
And our first signal, it comes from how Bangladesh reacted to a major international crisis, the strikes on Iran involving the US and Israel. Because it's in those high-pressure moments that you really get to see a country's true colors, diplomatically speaking.
And what we saw was, well, an incredibly cautious statement. It's almost more about what they didn't say. There was no direct finger-pointing at the United States or Israel. Nope. Instead, the focus was on these kind of vague concerns about escalation and the risks to their workers in the region. And get this, the language they used was apparently very, very similar to the story coming out of Washington.
So this really forces you to ask the question, right? Was that just Bangladesh being neutral and trying to cool things down? Or was it a quiet little nod, a subtle alignment, carefully worded so they wouldn't annoy a global superpower? It's a question that really makes you think.
Now look, one statement could just be a one-off thing. I get that. But let's move on to signal number 2, which is a lot more concrete. This one involves a trade agreement, signed with the United States at let's just say, a very strange moment.
And the timing here is absolutely everything. This new trade deal wasn't signed weeks or months before the national election. It was signed just 72 hours, 3 days before people went to vote. I mean, that is an incredibly sensitive time to make a huge international move, which just makes you wonder about the why and the why now.
But the real bombshell is buried in the fine print. The deal reportedly has a clause discouraging trade with non-market entities. Now, that sounds super technical and boring, right? Well, it's not. In policy speak, that's basically code for, hey, maybe don't do so much business with countries like China. This is a huge deal because it suggests Bangladesh is kind of agreeing to let the US-China fight shape its own economic path.
And if that wasn't compelling enough, our third signal adds a very human, very political twist to this whole story. And it's all about the one person who actually negotiated that controversial trade deal.
Okay, just follow this timeline because it's kind of a head-scratcher. First, this guy pushes through that controversial US trade deal right before the election. He gets a ton of criticism for it. You'd think, okay, maybe he's in some trouble. But then the exact opposite happens. After the election, he doesn't just keep his job, he gets promoted to foreign minister. The guy who signed the deal is now in charge of the country's entire foreign policy.
And that leads us to another really critical question. Is this just some bizarre coincidence, or does this promotion signal that the country wants continuity, that they're intentionally sticking with the new direction set by that trade deal? It really suggests that the deal wasn't a mistake. It was part of a plan.
So, why is all this happening right now? To understand that, we've got to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the giant geopolitical chessboard where Bangladesh is a key piece.
As they say in real estate, location, location, location. Bangladesh is sitting right on the Bay of Bengal, and this isn't just some big body of water. It's a vital highway for global trade and energy. And now it's become one of the new front lines in the competition between the US and China.
And you can see the dynamic right here. On one hand, you have the United States actively trying to grow its influence in the region. At the same time, China's already a huge player, pouring billions into infrastructure all around the Bay of Bengal. And who's sitting right in the middle of this massive tug-of-war? Bangladesh.
So let's connect these dots. We've seen a very cautious statement on Iran. We've seen a strategically timed trade deal that seems to have some anti-China language, and we've seen the person responsible for that deal get a major promotion. So, what does it all add up to?
This quote from our source really just hits the nail on the head. If you look at each of these signals by itself, yeah, you could probably explain them away. But when you put them all together, a pattern starts to emerge. They start to tell a story of a slow, quiet, but very deliberate realignment.
And that leaves us right here with this one last big question. Is Bangladesh actively choosing to pick a side in this new global competition? Or, in a world where just staying neutral is becoming a luxury, is the choice actually being made for them by these powerful geopolitical forces? And that is really something to think about.